All right, we're up to Ois Zayin. The Rebbe was discussing that the whole purpose of the neshama coming down is not for the sake of the neshama, but it's to uh, purify and work with the body and the nefesh hativis. The Rebbe is going to explain now that later on, in the Maimer, he adds to the nefesh abahamis and nefesh ativis, the guf and nefesh ativis, he also adds chelkei ba'olam, that also the neshamas come down for the portion in the world. The Rebbe is going to explain that in the beginning he talks about the person himself, the body, nefesh abaham, the tivis, and then he adds also his portion in the world. The Rebbe is going to explain this. Zion. Hine la'acharei shemevayer b'hamaimer goydel mailas haneshama kimoi shehoisa koydem yiridosa. After the Maimer explains the great advantage of the neshama as it was before it descended, shalochein eino tzricha tikun, and that's why it doesn't require corrections. The neshama has basically everything. It's on the highest level, and it doesn't need any correction. So then he says in the Maimer, he says in the Maimer, Sheyiridas haneshama lamata, that the descent of the soul below, ubichdei levarer ulezachet es haguf v'nafshei hativis, is in order to sort out and to refine the body and the natural soul. But he also adds ulahoir chelkei ba'olam, to illuminate the portion of the world. So the person comes down over here in the world, picks himself, but also to illuminate the portion of the world. So the Rebbe explains. We can say in the explanation, what is he adding now in addition to being mevarer the guf and nefesh ativis? The Rebbe says we can explain this. The beperik zeh shehu perik ha'acharein. This chapter is the last chapter, which is hasiyum v'hachoisem v'hahemshech. That's the end, the seal of this hemshech. The Bosi Legani ends with this 20th chapter. So mevu'er hasachakel. So in this chapter, it's explained the total, what we get out in the whole Maimer. V'hanikuda hapnimis v'hatichoinis, the kol ha'hemshech, and the point, the inner and central point of the entire hemshech, the entire Maimer. So therefore, he brings it out in the end. So not only that, and the Rebbe will explain in a minute, but the Rebbe says this is also yesh lekasher zeh. We can tie this im zeh shepedik zeh hu pedik ha'esrim. This is the 20th chapter. And the Rebbe mentioned earlier also that esrim is begimatria keser. 20, the letters ayin, shin, reish, yud, mem, if you total them, they equal 620, just like keser. I don't know, yesterday we had a problem with this, but this is very pashut. Esrim, the letters ayin and shin, 370, and reish is 570, and yud is 580, and another 40, 620, which is bigimatria keser. So this is the end of the Perek, is the 20th Perek, which is, it ends with the gematria of Keser. The Keser hu Rotzen. Keser is the level of Rotzen. So the rotzin v'hanekuda v'hasachakol shokol inyan hu, the point and what is the total summation of every aspect is hashlomas harotzin, to fulfill and complete the will. So keser rotzin is essentially the end of every subject. So here, the 20th chapter is the end of the subject of the Maimer, of the Hemshech. So the Rebbe explains, so why in the beginning, so the Rebbe says, the Shloimar, we can say, in the beginning of the Maimer, it talks about that the intent of creation of the world is to make what is the purpose, why the world was created. And here we're talking about what's the purpose of creation of man. In the beginning, it talks about the purpose of creation of the world. And in the end of the Maimer, it talks about the creation of man, because essentially everything in the world is for man, is for the person. So therefore, that's actually the ultimate goal. So this is Shloimar. Zehu mashe betchilas hahemshech. In the beginning of this hemshech, mevayer hakavone debriyas v'hisavus ha'olamis. Over there, he explains the intent of the creation and bringing the world into being. Ubetchilas haperig desiyum v'choisem hahemshech. And in the beginning of the chapter of the end, in the chapter 20th that we're explaining now, of the Siyum and the Chosim, the Hemshech, Mevayir HaKavone, the Ridis HaNeshama Beguf. Over here he explains the intent, why the Neshama comes down in the body. The beginning of the Maimer, he explains the Kavone of creating the world. And in the end of the Maimer, he explains the purpose of the descent of the neshama in the body, which is B'riyas Ha'odom, creating a man. What's the idea? Why is that? Ki kol habriya hi b'shvil ha'odom. Because all of creation is for man. It's for the people. So therefore, the ultimate, the end of the Maimer, the creation of the world, is for people. Atem kriyim Odom, which means not just man in general, but Yidden. Yidden are referred to, they are referred to as Odom. The Gam HaKavoneh shebebriyas ha'olamos. Because also the intent of the Briyas ha'olamos, as we explained in the beginning of the Maimer, what was the purpose? That Hashem desired that he should have for him, blessed, a dwelling place b'tachtonim. So even that intent is also hu bishvil Yisrael. That is also for the sake of the Yidden. And therefore, v'lochein, and therefore, the Perek HaEsrim, in the 20th chapter, Sheboy Mevuar Hap Nekuda Hapnimis, the Chol Ha'inyonim Shebeprakim HaKoyim. In the 20th chapter, in which it's explained the inner point of all the matters that were in the previous chapters. Medaber be'inyan hakavona debriyas ha'odom. So he talks about the intent of the creation of man, because essentially man is actually ultimately the reason for the creation of the world as well. At the beginning of the Maimer, it talks about the purpose of creation of the world. At the end of the Maimer, because ultimately the kavanah of creation of the world is for men. So based on this, we can say in chapter 20 itself, in the beginning of the of this discussion, Omer, he says, "Shakavone biri desaneshama hilisakenes aguf v'nefesh that the intent of the descent of the soul is to correct the body and the natural soul. But he doesn't mention chelke ba'olam. He just talks about fixing the body and the natural soul without mentioning also the chelik ba'olam. That's only in the end, later on. And so why did he admit it in the beginning? Ubichdei lahadgish. That is in order to emphasize she'ikeru pnimiyus hakavona hu ha'odom, that the main and inner intent is the human being. So he doesn't want to bring in, even though it's also for that, but he leaves that out because he wants to emphasize that the main and the inner intent of everything is not the world, is the person, is Odom, the Atem Kriyim Odom. Okay, so basically, the Rebbe explained over here that the neshama itself doesn't need any correction. It comes down into the world to correct the body nefesh ativis. And the Rebbe explains that he adds later on in chapter 20, 20 is the level of the conclusion. It's Rotz in the end. He says that it also illuminates the portion of the world. The Rebbe explains that in the beginning of the Maimer, he talks about the descent of the creation. Why was there creation of the world? The end of the Maimer, he talks, why was there the creation of the human beings? Because the human being is the ultimate intent of creation of the world. But in the beginning, therefore, in the beginning of chapter 20, he talks about just how the neshama comes down to help the body and the nefesh hativis, without mentioning chelka ba'olam, to emphasize that we are here mainly to, the purpose is all about Odom, is because of the human being. And later on, he tells us that also to fix the portion in the world. Okay, so it turns out that the descent of the neshama is not for the neshama itself, because the neshama itself doesn't require any correction. The Rebbe continues now, even though it doesn't require correction, but yet it is actually benefits. The neshama benefits from the fact that it corrects the body in two ways. The Rebbe is going to say, first, because it fulfills the intention. So when the neshama fulfills the purpose, it's come down here, it gets elevated. But on top of that, it also gets a higher madrega, that the neshama becomes in the level of a Baal Tshuva, where before it was the level of a tzaddik. Hine Yodua, and behold, it's known, the Hagam Sha'akavoneh, even though the intent with the descent of the neshama lamato, is in order to refine and to sort out the body and the natural soul. And not for the soul itself, but yet that's not the purpose, was for the body, nefesh hativis, but yet through its descent below, Nasser Ba'aliyah, and elevation takes place in the neshama as well. Now, this elevation that the neshama experiences is in two parts. Just in essence, because it did the Ratzon Hashem, it was mevarer, what it came down. And second, that it actually, in a revealed way, the neshama becomes in the level of a Baal Tshuva. The aliyah is in two matters. The elevation that takes place by the soul because it fulfills the intent. Intent was to work with the body. It fulfilled that, so it gets an elevation. But then from this that elevation, mishtalshul, evolves from this that in the soul becomes an elevation also in the revealed levels. The when it was above, it was in the level of a complete tzaddik. But when it comes down below, it gets the level of Baal Tshuva. We know Baal Tshuva is a greater level than a tzaddik. So therefore, it turns out that the only greater level that the neshama becomes about tshuva comes through coming down below. So these two aspects that the neshama benefits, in essence, for fulfilling the Ratzon Hashem, and in Giluyim, that it becomes in the level of about tshuva, the Rebbe says the same thing is the elevation that takes place in the world through the descent in the into the lower world, in the creation to create the world. The elevation is also in two aspects. Via Shloimar, we can say the Kivon Shabrias Ha'olamos Hu B'Shvil Yisrael Kinahom. Since the creation of worlds is for you, Lachein, therefore, Kimoy Shebe Yisrael. Just like by the Yidden, we explain, Al Yidei Yiridas Nishmosam Lamato, through the descent of the soul below. Nas Aliyah B'Haneshama, there is an elevation, becomes an elevation of the soul. V'Aliyah B'Shnei Inyonim, and the elevation, we said, is in two aspects. Possession Ashlemes Es HaKavana, the fact that it completes the intent. Possession Nasis B'B'Kenes Bal Tshuva, and that it becomes the love of Bal Tshuva. So from this also involves in the worlds. Same thing is in the world. There's two aliyahs that take place through the descent into this world to create the Olam Hazatach Shal Yidei HaYirida, the Olam Yisrael Yonim, Lahavis is Olam Hazatach, through the descent of the upper worlds to create, to bring about this physical low world, this world of ours, the lower world. Nase Bohem Aliyah, this makes in the upper worlds an elevation. The Aliyah Bishnei Inyonim, and the elevation is in these two matters. First of all, Shehem Hachona Shal Yodom Nase Hisavus Olam Hazeh Hatach. They are the preparation. It is through them that the lower world is created. It's from the upper world, so the upper worlds serve as a hachon, as a preparation for this world. The intent of the Dira B'Tachtonim is completed in this world, but this world comes into being through the upper worlds, which are the preparation for this world. Also, there's an advantage in the Olam Yisrael Yonim as far as the revelations from this world. Because in this world, in which we have to subdue and turn things around, is kafir is hapche, nimshach oir shalamaylu mishayachus lo'ilomis. That draws down a light which is higher than the world. Gam hamshochazu yeshno gam ba'ilum esel yonim. So also this hamshocha from the oir, which is higher in the world, also goes to the oilum esel yonim. Since that it's through them became the creation of this lower world, they end up benefiting the gilui that comes down in Olam Hazatachten to benefit the Olam Esel Yonim. So the Rebbe brings out over here that while the purpose of the neshama in this world is not for itself, but for the guf and nefesh b'hamis, yet there is an elevation in the neshama itself, both for fulfilling the Ratzon Ha'elyon and also the level of Baal Tshuva that the neshama becomes dafke b'olam hazeh, Same thing is in the descent of the world, because the world, the fact that the Olam Yonim come down to create the Olam Haza Tachten, they serve as a preparation. So therefore, they accomplishes an elevation because they accomplish the goal of Dira B'Tachtonim through them, through the Olam Yonim. But also they get to benefit from the special light which comes down in this world, the oir which is higher than oilamais, which comes down through iskafi v'ishapcha, that also benefits to the oilamais aliyah. Ches. So the Maimer explains, why do we say the neshama does not require correction? Is ki kol nishmoso v'nishmoso havekaimo b'diyukno'o kamei malko kadisha. Quoting from the Zohar, every soul and soul was existed in its image before Malka Kadisha, which means every neshama was there. Every neshama that we have over here already existed in its yokin, in its shame, in its image, and it's before the Holy King, before Hashem. So that's one reason what the neshama is on a very high level. But he brings down on Moisif, Sha'aneshama koidem sheyarda lamato oisa betachlis advekus. That the neshama, before it descended below, was totally connected in the source from which it was carved out, in the living God. The neshama is totally connected with the Eibeshter, with the Lekim Chaim. B'dveikus amiti udveikus tmidi, with a true cleaving and a constant cleaving. B'li shum pirut klal, without any separation. The neshama is always connected, pasted, truly to Elikim Chayim. So we're saying two things. First, the neshama was standing there before in its image, and it is totally connected. So what is these two aspects? They are two levels in the bittul of the neshama in its source. The Shnei Inyonim Elu, these two aspects, which is the two aspects are Havekaime B'diyuchno Kame Malka Kadisha, that it stood in its image before Malka Kadisha, and the second aspect Vishahoisa Betachlis Adveikus, and that it was totally connected. Hemshtei Darges Ba'Bitl Da Neshama. These are two levels in the bittul of the neshama. Kaimo, when we say he was standing Malka Kadisha, standing before the Holy King, that's like you're standing in front of the king. That's a subjugation. You're saying in front of the king, that's a subjugation. When a person stands up before the king, it has to be totally subjugated, but you're still an entity. You can't make any movements. Even though when you're standing in front of the king, you are totally subjugated, because we know the machve b'mochik, if you would make movements, kame malka, in front of the king, then you're liable for death. Then you become opposite of life, which means in the presence of the king, you can't make any signs, any movements. You have to be totally bottled. Notwithstanding the fact that you have to be bottled, nevertheless, on his own, the person is an entity. The reason why he's subjugated, because he's in the presence of the king, but he has a self-entity. So that's the first step that we say the neshama is in front of the king. The second step, that second piece of bread brings down that it's cleaving v'zesha neshama betachas advekus chulu, and that the shama is in total connection. Hu she'eino metzias la'atz. That means that it's not an entity for itself at all. It's a non-entity. Not only that it's an entity that is bottle, but it's a non-entity. It's connected to Hashem. The Maimer adds, the Rebbe continues to explain the chapter 20 from the Friedrich Rebbe. After he says that the neshama before its descent was totally connected, it had just one desire, one want, only to Hashem, nothing else with Hashem. It didn't want anything else but Hashem. So what is that adding? So we need to understand after he says that the neshama is totally connected, what is he adding? What is the novelty that it doesn't have any other desire? I mean, it's already connected. He said it all. What's missing? What is the Friedrich Rebbe adding when it says that it doesn't have any other thing? What else is there? Yes, we can explain this based on what we find in the Gemara. That Bikesh Yaakov legalis levonov kates hayomin, that Yaakov wanted to reveal to his son the end of days, but the divine removed itself from him. So it was like, what happened? Omar, so Yaakov says, because he couldn't tell them, and the Shechina left him, so he said, perhaps maybe in my bed, meaning my children, maybe there's some disqualification because the Shekhinah left him. So his sons tell them, he says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He said, Chuluk Shem, She'ein B'libcha Le'echad, Kach Ein B'libeinu Le'echad. Just like in your heart there's only one Hashem, Hashem Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Likewise, Ein B'libeinu Le'echad, also in our heart we only have Hashem. That's what the sons answered to Yaakov. So B'tzorich Lahavin, so we need to understand this. Harei habitul da hashvatim, this subjugation of the shvatim, they say, Ein b'lebeinu elachad, we only have one Hashem. Ulemata b'madrega ma'habitul da Yaakov. This is on a lower level than the subjugation of Yaakov. They're not at the same level. Here they're equating themselves, just like in your Baas also. They're in a low madrega. And you can see this from this case itself. I understood from this itself. That Yaakov, who is the measure of truth, so it wasn't just pretend. That was truthfully, he was in doubt. Maybe in one of his children, maybe there's some disqualification there. So they're not at the level of Yaakov. But Valoshin Kishem Chulu Kach Moidesh Shnei Hem B'Shaveh. But the Loshin Kishem Kach, that points to the fact that they're both equal. He says, so how could we say? Gam Tzarich Lahavin, also have to understand Masha Amru She'ein B'Lipcho Ela Echad. Why did they say just like in your heart there's only one? Why did they specify B'Lipcho? They should have said, just like you don't, by you there's only one, not in your heart there's only one. Why do they say, Shein b'libcha el echad? Harei habitl shel ha'ovis heinen amarkava. The subjugation of the forefathers is that they were like the chariot, they were bottled to Hashem. Balachas kama v'kama shel Yaakov, that's all the ovis, and certainly by Yaakov, b'chir shel ovis, he's the chosen of the forefathers. His subjugation was in all limbs of the body. Amru. So why did this sentence say Shein Belibcha El Echad? In your heart is one. Echad everywhere, in all limbs, everything. They were a Merkava bottle. Yoser and they move on, and even more, it's not understand. It doesn't just say believe. It says the pirush be libcha bebase shem she libcha. Here it says bilibcha in libcha bebase humashe betoich libcha. That means what is in your heart, not in heart, but bilibcha inside the heart. Al derech pirush the bikoil. When it says Shema Bikoil, meaning in the inside of the voice. The Mizeh Mashma, from here, it comes out, therefore, Shafilu Bahalev de Yaakov. Even when we talk about the heart of Yaakov, Inyan de Elo Echod Hurag B'Pnimius Halev. The idea of Elo Echod is in the inner of the heart, but not in the other limbs and not in the Chitzaynis Halev. Why is this emphasis that it's only in the heart when they were on a level of Bitla Merkava, it all encompassed them? And the Rebbe will go on to explain this from the Mittler Rebbe, but over here, the Rebbe has the two shilas. Okay, we'll run out of time over here, so we'll see. We'll mamshich tomorrow, Mr. Shem, the rest of the over here.
Sunday, good Shabbos.
All right, good Shabbos. Thank you very much. We'll see you later.